It is said that in a forgotten time, before the days of the walkthrough and the conceited ease of 3 dimensions, that video games were hard as shit. Boy, were they ever. In the late 1980s, Ninja Gaiden, or Gaiden, however you want to pronounce it, Ninja Gaiden on the NES personified the word challenge, which isn't to say that Tecmo's action-adventure legend was the forefather of difficulty. No, especially in earlier generations, you don't have to look far to find a game to test your patience, but most of those games also suck ass. Ninja Gaiden, on the other hand, aside from the occasional cheap deaths, was not impossible to play through. It was damn tough, but not impossible, and its quick, reflex-driven gameplay was rewarding. Sequels followed, and then Tecmo focused their talents on the fighting franchise Dead or Alive, which would combine 2 genres as never before, fighting and breasts. Then, in 2004, in a bid to reinvent the franchise, and on the heels of their success with DOA, developer Team Ninja resurrected Ryu Hayabusa, abandoning his venerable series' decade-long silence for success. Ninja Gaiden exclusively slashed its way onto the Xbox to the resounding acclaim of critics and commenters. Atypical of the Japanese company, Tecmo wanted to specifically target North American and European audiences at the time. As a result, due to the fact that Gaiden was only available on the American machine, the game didn't sell as well in Japan. But if you were in the US or Canada, you knew what was up. Ninjas were back in blood-bathing fashion. Gaiden's tale is a feudal story steeped in modern style. Just to set the standard for how badass the game is, it begins with one of the most awesome intros ever.
A legendary sword, said to have been carved out of the bones of a black dragon. It brought plague and death to the world during the age of ancient myth.
Like, fuck, we're not swimming in the kiddie pool anymore, no, this is the real deal. Basically, an evil weapon known as the Dark Dragon Blade is coveted by many for its immeasurable power, while the legendary Dragon Sword is its noble foil. Upon another training day of slicing some heads off, Ryu's homestead, the Hayabusa village, gets attacked, and a greater fiend known as Doku steals the Dark Dragon Blade and kills not only a good friend of Ryu's, but Ryu himself. The game doesn't really make it clear, but he's brought back to life by the grace of the Falcon's spirit, and the Hayabusa sets out to kill Doku, reclaim the blade, and return it to its resting place in honor of his fallen brethren. In the middle of all this, Rachel, a fiend hunter with a rack as dangerous as her will, is constantly pursuing her busty blood sister Alma. Ugh, fucking Alma. To kill her and free her spirit. But do you really give 2 shits about all that? No. But you'd give 2 of something for 2 of those. It doesn't really help matters when Rachel's lines are full of innuendo.
A curse, whether they are a saint or a sinner, can succumb to it and become a fiend.
Succumb?
So what does that make you?
Complex. And you?
Complex? Come on. Hey, if I was Ryu, I'd be like, do you happen to know the art of the flying swallow? Yeah, alright, that's enough, moving on. The tightness of the game's script is where it fuses all this storytelling with other cultural devices and settings. You'll board high-tech blimps armed with military spec ops, scour the ruins of an ancient Gothic monastery, and navigate the European-inspired streets of Tehran in the 15 to 20 hours it takes to finish the game. For the most part, none of these cultural collaborations make any part of the game feel anachronistic, though at times it can get a little ridiculous. I mean, take this part where 15th century Ryu walks up to a club and the 20th century bouncer denies him access.
You have a ticket for the party?
No.
I'm sorry, sir, but you're gonna need one to get in.
Sir? It's like he's not even phased he's talking to a ninja. Ninja Gaiden defines action-adventure, and to date it's one of the greatest and again most challenging to ever gratify the genre. Armed to the teeth with all the ninja-appropriate gear, your main weapon is the Dragon Sword, which slices and dices with a surplus sum of brutal moves that carve enemies apart. Oh man, that's so bloody. You could upgrade the sword or take up other means of death and destruction like the nunchucks. The combat system was unbelievable, a trademark taken from Tecmo's Dead or Alive. Tapping buttons was responsive, and the variety of moves available never let the game descend into mundane button mashing. Rather, strategy and reflexes dictated your many battles, with emphasis on reflexes because, man, this was a hard game back in 2004. Honoring its prime precursor, the difficulty was a far cry in the sky from mostly anything out at the time. There were 2 difficulties, normal and hard. Now, we've become so accustomed to associating the difficulty normal with moderate, but no, normal just means the standard, and Gaiden's standard was enough to wear down your teeth via excessive grinding. The numerous set of enemies were mercilessly quick and aggressive and could drain your health bar in a dozen seconds. Black ninjas would be assholes and chuck incendiary shurikens at you, while zombie archers would stand afar and send arrows bigger than battering rams hurtling at your head. But because the game was fun, you wanted to continue and beat that son of a boss you were swearing tirelessly over. And every completed hurdle was deeply rewarding and felt like you had beaten the game, much less beaten the first stage. There were very few cheap deaths, at least when it came to fighting enemies, and practice ultimately did make perfect. You get good enough, and dare I say it, you could even try tackling the harder difficulties. But you wouldn't want to, because of this bitch, Alma. The only time I've ever had to fetch a face towel to wipe the sweat off my controller. A boss like no other, and a boss that, dare I say more, nearly made me cry. But that wasn't enough. How about some icing? How about you have to face her again later in the game? Ugh, no mercy from Team Ninja. Yes, challenging combat defined Ninja Gaiden, but this wasn't just a fighting game, it was an adventure game which provided the perfect counterweight to balance the action. Using The Legend of Zelda as a template, the city of Tyron served as your hub for the game, which branched out to different areas and underground dungeons. Each area had its own assortment of puzzles, which were simple enough to figure out, but sorely appreciated to slow down the pace of the intermittent swordplay. Ironically, the adventuring portions of the game resulted in some of the most frustrating moments. The somewhat sticky control didn't fare well in navigation, especially when you had to make precision jumps and acrobatic maneuvers with little margin to screw up. It also didn't help that you could move the camera around, but instead you could only recenter it behind Ryu by pulling on the right trigger. In sum, Gaiden succeeded as an action-adventure, but some of the level design implied platformer. The game was assuredly not. Just to ice the near-perfect cake, Ninja Gaiden was one of the greatest-looking games to ever be released at the time. Opting for power over popularity, Tecmo chose to release the game on the Xbox for its hardware capabilities. Beautiful, stunning. There are a list of words, but none can amount to the picture's thousands. I mean, just look. Just look at the game. I mean, it's awesome. Sharp textures, excellent animation, particularly on Ryu, and overall a clean appearance earned Gaiden its reputation as one of the most polished and presentably produced titles in a long time. The sound effects kicked ass, from sword attacks to the sound of blocking enemies' bullets. It's just amazing. I mean, how does he do that? Even the English voiceover wasn't too shabby.
Yes, he has entrusted me with the sword while he continues his training. He never seems satisfied with the power he wields.
A number of unlockables fleshed out the value. You could unlock the original arcade Ninja Gaiden by collecting 50 scarabs, and after completing the story, you could replay the game with a mind-blowingly killer futuristic suit, complete with lightsaber. Oh. Remakes and sequels have followed in light of Ryu's 04 success, but none have come close to its perfect balance. The game was challenging, but it wasn't impossible. It was action-fueled, but it was also story-driven. It was rooted in Japanese, North American, and European culture. And most importantly, it was bloody, but it was also busty. What we got from those formula of factors was a crimson slash of seductive power. And we succumbed.